Good morning. I am Lynn Cusick. I'm a member of the Ministerial Search Committee of the Greenville Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, where we embrace freedom of thought, encourage spiritual growth, and practice social responsibility. I realize the program has me listed as Lynn Lucas. We're frequently confused. And here's how you tell us apart. I'm the loud one, okay? All right. My upcoming memoir is titled Places I Have Been Shushed, okay? So, we have some brief announcements. The president of the board, Howard Jones, is gonna talk this morning. That would be you.
Good morning. Don't worry, it's very brief. We ask that you stay in your seats after the service so that we can get the meeting going and vote. And those of you who are voting virtually, you can't do it from the Facebook normal way of watching. You have to have gotten a code and be able to sign into the Zoom meeting. You may already be there. But that's all I have.
Okay. I'd like to say hello to any of the newcomers on the live stream and in person this morning. We're glad that you're here. We'd love to get to know you better. So if you are comfortable, offer a comment on the Facebook stream or grab a green mug at coffee hour so we can say hello. It's so wonderful to have you all here today for our special service where we get to meet and hear from our ministerial candidate, Reverend Christina Hochman. Please know that whatever your history, whatever your heritage, however you arrived at this beautiful place, wherever you pick up your Wi-Fi or cellular signal, you are welcome here. I invite you to all take a collective breath and let's settle in for the service. Please indulge me as I briefly summarize what has been accomplished over this past year. The hunt for a settled minister began at a congregational meeting in April of last year when you, the congregation, voted to assemble the Ministerial search team. I would like to ask the members of the search team to rise when I call your name. Bibi Harris, Bo Bogani, Jennifer Kayumjan, Kat Stellern, Pat Cheney, and Tommy Reese. Thank you all. We have all been mindful since that April day that we represent you and this amazing congregation. Along the way, we solicited input from you through the Congregational Survey, through the Beyond Categorical Thinking workshop, through multiple cottage meetings, and through various conversations at different events. As part of the process, we created and compiled hundreds of pages of documents. For one example of that, our summary of the Congregational Survey was 73 pages long. Our hashtag for the committee is #overthink, okay? The survey, the 73 pages, was just one piece of data among dozens that we gathered to showcase GOOF to potential candidates. We also exchanged thousands of texts and emails with each other, with candidates, with members of this congregation, with leadership of this congregation, and the UUA. And we spent hundreds of hours in meetings working through this process. We read the ministerial application of 6 candidates. We interviewed 4 candidates via Zoom, and we narrowed the field to 3 finalists, each of whom came for a weekend and preached at a neutral pulpit. We watched dozens more sermons through the power of the internet. Over and over again. So we kept coming back through the whole process. We kept coming back to this. Who is the best minister for the Greenville UU Fellowship? She's a thoughtful writer, a careful listener, an MBA, an ally, an activist, and a salsa dancer. Once again, it is the great honor of the search team to introduce to you Reverend Christina Hochman.
Oh, cut it out. Oh my goodness, that's a lot. No, thank you. Good morning, Goof. Good morning. It's been a pleasure getting to meet, getting to know so many of you a little bit over this past week. And for those I have not had a chance to meet personally yet, well, there's plenty of time for that, and it will happen. And I'm looking forward to it. I'd also like to say good morning to those who might be viewing from the fellowship hall or also online, watching from home today. I want to extend a good morning even to the souls who are not present in this room this morning. First, I would like to share some opening words from the Reverend Gretchen Haley. Do not fail to be surprised by the catching of your breath, the quickening of your heart, the fullness of your eyes, wide and suddenly awake with awe. Here is a place filled with wonder, that still there might be something new born today, that we might be born new today. Do not fail to notice the changing, the life full and abundant already beginning by our coming together, already possible by the promises we make to give, to receive, to become more together, and to forgive. Again and again, the falling short that is always already here. We find ourselves among the courageous, feeling ourselves trying to be brave with each in and out of breath, each word, each pause, each song, we give thanks to be on this journey in this faith together. Come, let us worship.
Good morning. This is a chalice lighting this morning. In her interview with Bill Moyers, the Bishop Catherine Jefferts Shorey, who was an oceanographer before becoming a priest, and then later the presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church, explains how she sees the connection between science and faith. My faith journey has been, as a scientist, about discovering the wonder of creation. Things that come in different sizes and colors and shapes and body forms are all part of that incredible diversity of creation that's present below the waters, where we never even see them. And the Psalms tell us that God delights in that. I don't believe they, religion and science, are at their depth incompatible. In the Middle Ages, theology was called the queen of the sciences. There are ways of knowing, and it is our hunger for radical certainty that leads some people to assume that they are incompatible. Religion and science are both ways of knowing, but they go at it from somewhat different perspectives. Science asks questions about how things happen and where they've come from. And religion and faith traditions ask questions of meaning, about why we're here, and what we should do, and what we should have here, and how we should relate to one another and creation. And now, if you will rise as you are able and join us in singing hymn number 108, My Life Flows On in Endless Song.
Good morning. For this morning's story, I invite you to close your eyes and enter into a time of meditation and reflection. Have you ever watched a seed grow? Have you ever noticed how it begins so small, so still, so quiet, like a gift wanting to be opened, and how slowly it wakes up, begins to unfold, growing into something larger and larger and larger than you know? That whatever comes from a seed usually ends up looking very little like the seed it came from, which is also true of the very first seed. Once, long, long ago, way back before the beginning, so long ago, there was no such thing as time because there was no one there to count it. Everywhere was a huge, deep, mysterious place, like something waiting to happen. There were no stars, no sun or moon. There was no place like Earth, not a drop of water or a single tree or rock or flower, and no living beings anywhere. But in that deep, waiting space was hidden the tiniest point of something, no bigger than a seed. It was not a flower seed. It was not an elm tree seed. It was not a seed of corn, although all those things were included in the seed. You might call it the everything seed, because that is what it became. No one knows where that first seed came from, or how it was planted, or how it knew, in the way that only seeds seem to know, how long to wait for just the right moment to sprout and grow. But all at once, this tiny seed, cradled and nourished in the rich soil of space, woke up, broke open, and began to unfold. Unfolding, unfolding, and blossoming forth into an enormous blazing ball of bright light, like a great grandmother's sun, and the universe was born. Out fluttered the galaxies like a storm of snowflakes swirling and gathering into the brightest, most blindingly beautiful cloud of stars. And out of those star clouds whirled our own star, the one we call the sun, and our earth, and our moon, and all the round spinning planets we have learned how to name. And this is the secret of that tiny seed. You and I were there in the very beginning. Just as the idea for each leaf on a big oak tree lies hidden inside an acorn, we were there with all the stars and planets, all the rocks and oceans, plants and animals and people, everything that is now and ever was or ever will be was inside that first tiny seed. So whenever you hold a seed in your hand and wonder what it could become, imagine how you and all that is here once came from the tiniest speck of an everything seed before it sprouted and grew, long, long ago in the way back beginning of time. Now, if this were an ordinary story, it would end right here. But this is the story of the universe, and it keeps unfolding. What once began in a blazing blossom of light continues every day. New stars sprout open in the deep soil of space. New plants and animals appear on the earth. Seeds of many kind are scattered everywhere to help us remember. And new people are born every day with the spark of that first life, still alive and burning deep inside, waiting like the everything seed to shine in ways that are not yet to be known.
And now is the time in our service when we take the offering to sustain and fulfill the mission of the Greenville UU Fellowship. I ask you to please give generously and from your heart.
Before the sharing of joys and sorrows, I would like to offer some words for meditation and maybe about 30 minutes. 30 minutes, oh my goodness. That's a way to lose a vote. 30 seconds of silence before we proceed. Oh my. These words are from Kristen Harper. I do not wish to breathe another breath if it is not shared with others. The breath of life is not mine alone. I brought myself to be with you, hoping that by inhaling the compassion, the courage, and the hope found here, I can exhale the fear, the selfishness, the separateness I keep so close to my skin. I cannot live another moment, at least not one of joy, unless you and I find our oneness somewhere among each other, somewhere between the noise, somewhere within the silence of the next breath. I now invite you into a time of silence.
I invite you to breathe deeply and be present in the spirit of life, which is in us and through us and around us, to those human connections that give us strength when we are struggling and celebrate when we are joyful. It's custom in this fellowship to honor the joys and sorrows in our lives by naming them as we light candles at the center of this community of memory and hope. The gathered community hears and holds the difficult with the joyful as we honor the experiences that make us who we are. We have one joy or concern this morning. It's from the not loud one. A candle for the incredible dedication of our ministerial search team and the support and patience of their partners. And that was from the real Lynn Lucas. And then I'll light one final candle for all those joys and sorrows that are not spoken today, but are held in our hearts.
I'd like to tell you the brief story of the mystic and the scientist, which is actually part of the UUA Tapestry of Faith curriculum attributed to no author in particular. Otherwise, I would give them attribution. One day, a religious man approached a mystic and asked, "Does God exist?" "Allow me to go within for an answer," the mystic replied. After meditating for quite some time, expanding her heart consciousness to embrace the totality of existence, she answered, "I do not know what you mean by the word God, but I do know that this world is more mysterious and more wonderful than I could ever imagine. I know that you and I are part of something so much larger than our own lives. Perhaps this something larger is what you seek." Then the religious man approached a scientist. "Does God exist?" he asked. "Let me think," the scientist replied. And so she thought. She thought about the vastness of the universe, the 156 billion light years, or something like 936 billion trillion miles in diameter, and the almost immeasurable smallness of a quark. She thought of how the energy of the Big Bang fuels the beating of her own heart. And then she answered, "I do not know what you mean by the word God, but I do know that this world is more mysterious and more wonderful than I could ever imagine. I know that you and I are part of something so much larger than our own lives. Perhaps this something larger is what you seek. The religious man then thought to himself. He thought of what he knows and what he does not know. He thought about how he knows what he knows and how he knows he doesn't know what he doesn't know. He thought about his experience of this world and how it is but one tiny, infinitesimal fraction of all experience. He thought about his dependence on forces larger than himself, and he thought about the interdependence of all existence. He experienced wonder and pondered mystery. And then he knew. He knew in his soul the truth of what the mystic and the scientist said, that he is part of something so much larger than his own life. And then, only then, did he think about what he might call it. So today I will be speaking about the first source of Unitarian Universalism. As you may know, in addition to having 7 principles, which we talk about quite a bit, we have these things called the 6 sources. And I like to describe our 6 sources as the vast buffet from which we Unitarian Universalists may select our spiritual wisdom. And that's a pretty special thing to do, that not being limited to one source of the holy or the truth, right? Stated really specifically, the first source of Unitarian Universalism is, and this is a mouthful, direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder affirmed in all cultures, which moves us to a renewal of the spirit and an openness to the forces which create and uphold life. Right, that's a long thing. But I think the important part comes at the beginning. And there are a couple of ways you can look at it. So let's focus in on direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder. Direct experience of transcending mystery and wonder. Now, look at direct experience. Our faith tradition is telling us that we can trust ourselves and believe our own experience in the search for wisdom. Again, a little unusual, right? And I think we're very fortunate to have that. But it's not only just direct experience of any kind of experience, direct experience of transcending mystery and wonder. So going back to the mystic and the scientist, what I really like about the story, as you might guess, is it shows that mysticism and science are not polar opposites like we might expect. They are simply 2 different methods of arriving at the same conclusion, that it's all about something larger, no matter how you conceive of it or what you might choose to call it. And that's another thing I love about the UU faith tradition is it doesn't matter if we're theists, atheists, or agnostics. We're generally interested in connecting to something, right? Connecting to something larger, whether it's described as God or goddess, or as the interdependent web of all existence, or the universe, or the mystery, or the human family, or the family of all living things. You know, our something largers might not be exactly the same, but yet we can come together every week, to celebrate and hold in reverence all of our larger somethings the way we see them. And it's this whole idea of the larger something that really is the reason I like to refer to our Sunday services, our gatherings here, as worship services. And I know some folks feel that word's too religious-y and too, constraining, or reminds them of a religious past they're not too crazy about. And I respect that, I really do. But when you unpack the word worship, the root of the word worship comes from the word worth. So you might even want to think of it as worthship instead of worship. It means we are considering what is of significant or ultimate worth. We are here to consider and celebrate the things that are most important. So when we're invited into worship, it denotes this special time, right? This special time we set aside from our daily lives to contemplate and celebrate and hold in reverence, lift up, and maybe even have some awe thrown in there as well. Lift up those something largers than our individual selves, whatever that something larger might be. So we can have worship. We can also have mysticism that doesn't conflict with science. And Albert Einstein was an unapologetic mystic. Did anybody know this about him by any chance? He said the most beautiful and profound emotion we can experience is the sensation of the mystical. It is the sower of all true science. He to whom this emotion is a stranger, who can no longer wonder and stand wrapped in awe, is as good as dead. All right, Mr. Einstein. Right? He's not joking around, is he? So there's a scholar named David Steindl-Rast, and he wrote what is called a classic paper in 1990. I'm not sure why it's a classic, but maybe because we're still talking about it. The paper was called The Mystical Core of Organized Religions. And in this work, he provides his own working definition of what mysticism is. So he says, by the way, this quote is a little long. I'll tell you when it's over and when I'm talking again, because I don't want you all to get lost. That can happen so easily with quotations. He says, mysticism has been democratized in our day. Not so long ago, real, air quote, mystics were those who had visions and levitations and bilocations, and most important were those who had lived in the past. Any contemporary mystic was surely a fake. Today, we realize that extraordinary mystical phenomena have little to do with the essence of mysticism. So it's not about those big woo-woo experiences. But he continues, of course, genuine mystics had told us this all along. We just wouldn't listen. Now we've come to understand mysticism as the experience of communion with ultimate reality. That's his basic definition, communion with ultimate for everybody to some extent. So, he says, we find ourselves officially recognized as bona fide mystics. He's basically saying we couldn't avoid it if we tried. And finally, before the end quote, he says, some of us even sense the challenge to translate the bliss of universal communion into the nitty-gritty of human community and daily living. So for now, that's it from David Steindl-Rast. It turns out that our UU faith tradition has a long history of mysticism on both sides, even the Unitarian side. And it's kind of obvious when you figure it's the transcendentalists sprang from the Unitarians. They made it a priority, to have these transcendent, to feel transcendent, to view the world through the lens of transcendence. It's right there in their name. And, there's still a lot of UU mystics out there. There's an online community of UU mystics that can be found, guess where, at uumystics.org. They also have a Facebook group. And they, the UU mystics, say that mysticism is one of the most misunderstood concepts, often mistaken with esoteric and far-out spiritual paths. Some believe mysticism is the opposite of rationalism, or that mystics are isolated beings disconnected from reality. But, as we've talked about with the mystic and the scientist, mysticism is quite the opposite. It's communion with, rather than a disconnect from, ultimate reality. Mysticism isn't necessarily this way out escape into a past life or to some kind of, out-of-body experience. Again, the aim of mysticism is to connect us with that something larger, the unity, the oneness, those feelings, that encourage some people to pray, some people to meditate, along with other numerous spiritual practices that help, us find this special, often pretty short and fleeting feeling that we might call by so many names. We could call it enlightenment, we could call it peace, we could call it oneness, we could call it higher consciousness. There's a Unitarian Universalist out there named Sam Berliner III, as not to confuse him with the other two, I suppose. He says, mysticism is quite simply the frank acknowledgement that there is far more to existence than we can know and we can ever know. That sounds pretty reasonable, doesn't it? So for me personally, once in a while I'll have a little breakthrough moment of this sense of peace or these feelings of great connectedness and oneness. Sometimes if I'm really lucky, it'll happen in meditation or happen on the yoga mat. And, that's about as exciting and dramatic as it gets for me for mystical experiences. And, these experiences, I guess we seek them out because they feel good. They take us to a place of deep meaning and connection. And I find these little moments, they also put life into perspective, right? It's so easy to get self-involved in the daily, all this stuff going on. But these moments, these kind of breakthrough moments, these transcendent moments, they remind me that it's not just all about me, that I'm just a teeny tiny little part of something much, much larger. Now, if only I could keep that perspective all the time, that would be terrific, but, I'm still a work in progress. But even though I haven't had any really dramatic mystical experiences, there are a lot of people out there who have had them. They do exist. And probably more people than you think. Some of the most sane, reliable, rational, and together people I know who have had some pretty extraordinary mystical experiences. They just don't usually feel safe talking about them, except to maybe a really trusted friend or after a couple of drinks at the bar. So the Reverend Meg Barnhouse, I know you recognize that name. She, of course, has this great wit, so she has this witty way of dealing with those who don't believe in mystical experiences. She tells her folks who, say they don't believe in mystical experiences, she says, so many people have them, it is unscientific to ignore them. So go Meg. I know, that's good, isn't that? That's so good. And yet there's even more mysticism and UUism I can tell you about. This came from a Facebook post from an unnamed minister out there of his personal experience in his UU church. He said, back in the fall, I was asked to give a lecture to kick off the adult RE programming for the year, and my lecture was about mystical experiences. He continues, last night, after numerous requests, I facilitated a group discussion about mystical experiences. The room was packed with people who came to share their secret stories. People shared their out-of-body experiences, soul travel, encounters with spirits and ghosts, premonitory dreams, automatic writing, telekinesis, conversations with the dead, trances, altered states, and more. Sharing was intimate and vulnerable and was met with acceptance and appreciation. He says finally, I am convinced that these types of conversations are important. I love them. That's a bunch of UUs he's talking about. Can you believe it? So it appears that many people have had these experiences but are reluctant to talk to them because of reasons I'm sure you understand. And it turns out that most religions are not much better than us in supporting mysticism, because mystical experiences are very individual, and individuality isn't always the primary goal in many religious institutions. Let's put it that way. So, and also it seems like every major religion has this kind of area where they put all the mystics. Islam has Sufi mystics, right? Judaism has Kabbalah. Christian mysticism is quite prevalent, especially on the outer fringes of the Catholic Church. Lots of mysticism happening there, and Catholic mysticism goes back to the very beginning. Now, some scholars argue that all religions arose out of people having mystical experiences. So back to David Steindl-Rast, the classic paper guy, he believes that all religious doctrine can be traced to its roots in mystical experience, and that in every religion there's a tension. There's a tension between the mystical and the religious establishment. So religion actually starts because people are having these experiences and they want to know what it's all about, and then the religion comes in, standardizes, makes it into an institution, and then the mysticism kind of declines. And again, as the new religion gets organized and institutionalized, the mysticism is progressively lost. The beauty and the awe and the mystery of something larger is superseded by the ultimate truth of doctrine. Boo. Boo, yeah. A nice, gentle, not disrespectful boo. And he says, personal, direct experience is sacrificed to the gods of religious law and conformity. And that's just a shame, isn't it? Now, there's another UU minister out there, the Reverend Dr. David Breden, and he has a different take on all of this mystical stuff. He sees mystical experiences as a function of brain chemistry, but yet he values them just the same and thinks they're really important. Breden, he says, spirituality is emotion. Sometimes the spiritual emotion springs from a consciously adopted attitude toward the world we see around us. Other times it hits us unexpectedly. A spiritual experience can be anything from the warm, fuzzy feeling we get singing a song we love to the inexpressible mystical experience of feeling one with all that is. He continues, both great feelings, both not mysterious. As we learn more about brain science, we see more clearly what techniques and technologies best trigger certain responses. So he says mystical experience is really about being in the moment, listening without preconception, without judgment, without the interference of ego, listening in order to hear, to experience the right now, with as little of the usual interference as possible. He calls it unmediated experience, and it requires us to be in a place of the breath and that mental space, I love this, that is at once maximum concentration, and at the same time maximum surrender. And he says this experience can be achieved by lots of different techniques, from meditation to fasting, or merely looking up at the stars. Also from this, he talks about you can have this moment from centering prayer. They often do in Christianity, Buddhist, Zazen, the various yogas. These are all techniques that human beings have developed for getting into this transcendent space. He says mysticism is simply a technique aimed at achieving a mystical experience. And he says the experience is a feature of your brain. It has little to do with any specific or religious or philosophical practice, except that all religions aim for this experience and have their own techniques for achieving it. Since mystical experiences are a feature of brain chemistry, not specific religions, atheists and agnostics have no particular reason to poo-poo the idea. Those were his words. Mystical experience doesn't need a religious component at all, as was demonstrated by the work of a psychologist who introduced the notion of flow experience. So flow experience, I'm sure these are common experiences that everybody have. Have you been writing or painting or drawing or gardening, and you're so focused it's like the rest of the world goes away and you're thinking about nothing else, and then your spouse or somebody in your life, alerts you that 4 hours have passed by and it's time for dinner, and you're going, what? Really? That's a flow experience. And Breden, he equates those experiences with mystical experiences as well. And so he says there's nothing mysterious about these experiences, and you can put yourself in the way of these flow experiences by following, simple procedures, doing the things that bring flow. And again, he says spirituality is a feeling. We don't have to buy what particular religions are selling to access these feelings. He says it's all right there in our heads. So that's the end of Reverend Dr. David Breden there. So a lot of these spiritual practices that kind of strive toward us having these mystical or transcendent experiences, you can do those all by yourself, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I think there is worth in kind of coming and doing them together. It's a little less lonely. It's the interaction in community, coming together to celebrate what is of ultimate worth, with the support, with the love, with the encouragement, with the learning from one another, some mutual support on our individual life journeys, I think is very important. There's a famous yogi who has a large ashram in Virginia the town is called Yogaville. His name was Swami Satchidananda. He was famous for a particular saying. The saying is, many paths, one truth. And Unitarian Universalism has a very similar saying from the Reverend Forrest Church. He says, many windows, one light. We can look through many different lenses, many different styles of windows, many types of glass to view the same light that is out there. So here as Unitarian Universalists, we have the freedom, we have variety offered to us to choose many different paths to truth. And because it turns out that those many different paths, they often lead to pretty much the same place. We may call this place different things. We may call it oneness, enlightenment, self-actualization, wisdom, or ultimate reality. But in the end, that's just words. Just different words to describe pretty much the same thing. It's really all about something larger than ourselves. So I hope today's service has broadened your thinking about mysticism, whether you consider yourself a mystic or you're just kind of, I'm not so sure. Maybe your comfort with this idea has grown. I think it's really important, I think, that we acknowledge and celebrate our mystical sides. That urge inside us to find the oneness and the wholeness and the unity, that urge to feel the wonder and the awe of our very existence. And really these moments encourage us to appreciate and live in the moment, which is so important. Every religion, it turns out, and every person really does have a mystical core. Now, the challenge for us is to access this mystical core and really live into its very power. So may it be so. Amen, and blessed be. All right, now I believe we are going to sing one of my favorite hymns, 298, Wake Now My Senses. The reason I love this hymn is that I think in all its verses it describes Unitarian Universalism in a very thorough and easily accessible way, and I enjoy hearing the verses all the time. Please rise in body or spirit. while I share some closing words. From the Marjorie Newlin Leeming. Remembering that the universe is much larger than our ability to comprehend, let us go forth from this time together with the resolve to stop trying to reduce the incomprehensible to our own petty expectations, so that wonder, the sense of what is sacred, can find space to open up our minds and illumine our lives. My new friends, go in peace, return in love, and blessed be. And I forgot the extinguishing, so we will do that right now.
If y'all want to read with me, you're welcome to. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Thank you.
Amen.